There's a certain beauty in simplicity. And in this particular case, I'm not talking about elegant simplicity that actually hides a lot of depth. I mean just basic, straightforward, unassuming, but still enjoyable simplicity. The kind that can be found all over the place in Traveler's Tales' first LEGO Star Wars game from 2005, or more specifically, the core version released on PC, PlayStation 2, Xbox and GameCube. This simplicity is also the reason why I want to talk about LEGO Star Wars 1 specifically and not the complete saga, even though that game includes pretty much all content from here, but this content would not be experienced the same way. While the game is flawed, I believe there's a reason LEGO Star Wars became so popular that it has essentially redefined the entire direction for most licensed LEGO games moving forward. That being simple, as long as it is polished and atmospheric, can be good. Really, really good. Sometimes you just don't need mechanics with tons of depth, 10 types of collectibles, secrets that require you to go through 15 steps beforehand to find, being challenged and whatnot. Sometimes you just want to be immensely charmed and have fun without anything in particular feeling daunting, including 100%ing the entire game. And all this is precisely what LEGO Star Wars provides. Though truth be told, the game's straightforward exterior is somewhat deceptive, as it is held intact by an internal structure and design principles much more intricate than one would assume. Let's begin dissecting what makes LEGO Star Wars tick, starting with the core loops. At the beginning of every gameplay session, we turn up in a little hub world where we can choose a story mission to go to. There we collect our main currency, studs, as well as special mini-kit collectibles. However, with a couple exceptions we'll discuss later, it's impossible to collect all mini-kits in story mode, since a number of them require abilities your characters in the mission won't have. But after completing a level in story mode, you can access the free play mode, which allows you to use any minifigure you want, which means access to those missing abilities. You get free minifigures by completing story missions, but also there is a bunch that you can buy for studs, and the purchase availability of these extra ones also depends on your story progression. Getting all 10 minikits in a level will grant you even more studs, as well as place special LEGO models in your hub world. Oh, and your whole minifigure collection also populates the hub as well. You can use your ever-increasing riches to get useful or funny extras, ranging from putting mustaches onto characters to becoming invincible. These extras can be active in absolutely any playable situation. And the final cherry on top, getting a certain amount of studs in a level will reward you a super kit, and doing so in all levels will grant access to a special bonus one. Both of these are also represented in the hub world as well. So the hub world, which in this game is Dexter's Diner, a fine location though also partially weird since you only ever see it once for a couple minutes in a single Star Wars movie, is a representation of your entire progression and collection that are fed by everything you do in the game. Every element of this loop feeds into one another, and yet since there is not that many components, it doesn't feel overwhelming. There is an aspect that might be called strange in that collecting minikits doesn't reward anything else besides studs and visuals, but since purchasing everything requires quite a bit of currency, to me that's not really an issue. Since the structure pushes to complete every level at least twice, obviously this creates a replayability factor, but that aspect wouldn't work without the cornerstone of the entire endeavor, the minifigures themselves. There are 56 minifigures in LEGO Star Wars, and it really wants you to get them all. To make collection matter, it's important what each minifigure can or can't do, since that defines and influences the level design, and to make the game actually fun, it's important how they do what they do, while maintaining only 3 action buttons: attack, jump, and special ability. That's all LEGO Star Wars is working with, the only other functions available relate to switching between characters. The most complex type of minifigures are probably the Jedi and Sith. They attack with a lightsaber, which is the game's most mechanically in-depth aspect. You tap attack multiple times to do a combo. If you tap at the correct moment when an animation ends, your lightsaber gains sparkles and deals more damage, while keeping up that sparkly combo until the end can even break through blocks the Jedi can perform by holding the attack button. And if they try to block a blaster shot at the time it connects with a character, it will be deflected straight back at the attacker. Jedi can jump and double jump, and they can combine that with an attack for a jump attack or a super jump attack. The latter, to be honest, is the most overpowered move in the game, and really the only thing you need to defeat any boss outside of their scripted sequences, which is a bit of a shame but not too big of a problem in the context of this particular game. Jedi can also use the Force on specific objects, to either build something, interact, move, or destroy depending on the level design intentions. And if the character is a dark side follower, they can use the Force on special black and red objects. So yeah, the Jedi and Sith are stacked with abilities, which makes sense given their status in the universe. But what makes it actually enjoyable to collect all Jedi is the fact that they fight differently. Even the side characters who do use existing animations have their speed modified one way or another to add some differentiation, while all prominent personalities get an absolutely unique set. Obi-Wan doesn't fight like Anakin. Mace Windu has slow but powerful slashes. The jump attack of Darth Sidious is the ridiculous rotating twirl from the third movie, and it's amazing. And Yoda jumps like crazy. In combat. Outside of combat, he uses his walking stick very slowly. Although if you just press jump once, he gets into floating mode on his hover chair. So you can see how even within the same type of characters, there is attempts to make them feel unique. The most common minifigures are blaster ones, and their ability set might feel very poor in comparison to the Jedi. They can only jump, shoot, and use grapple hooks in specific spots. But honestly, I wouldn't say that controlling those characters is any less fun. Jedi can do a lot of things, but outside of the Force, they're not exactly the best at them. I found that it's actually much more straightforward to kill most standard enemies and destroy objects with these blaster characters than it is with the Jedi, so in plenty of situations they are actually more preferable. And they too have differences in animations and things like their blaster shot color, and trust me, to a kid, making sure that a clone trooper has blue blaster shots while a droid has red ones is very important. Even characters that you purchase for studs often have something unique to them. Battle droids might feel absolutely useless, slow rate of fire, no ability to jump, but controlling them in free play mode you discover that other battle droids are not shooting at them, so you're essentially in disguise. In fact, other battle droids will follow, so you can gather up a little army for fun, and if you control the commander battle droid, you can always use the special ability to get out a communicator and say, "Roger, Roger."
Roger, Roger.
It's useless, but come on, it's Roger, Roger. General Grievous probably has the most unique set of lightsaber attack animations wielding 4 at once, but he can't use the Force. He does, however, have super jump, which means that he can jump higher than others. His bodyguards have super jump, but not double jump, meaning that their single jump is really high. They also have unique attack animations and a special feature that their head gets missing when health is low. They cost studs though, unlike Jar Jar, who you get for free after a story mission. He can't attack, but you won't find a better jumper in this game than Jar Jar, since his animations make him a little easier to wield than constantly spinning Grievous, for example, making him somewhat essential to the dismay of all haters. The Droideka, who can roll fast and has a shield protecting from all blaster fire when standing still, yeah, you can purchase that minifigure and use it in the game with the same exact set of abilities, and it's fun. Jango Fett can float forever with his jetpack, although he still can't cross distances that only hovering astromech can, and he has 2 blasters. Both of these aspects make him very satisfying to play as. The only 2 small characters in the game, Kid Anakin and Kid Boba Fett, whose only purpose is to go through small vents, have different animations of doing so. Even the Gong droid is fun, or rather funny, because he's extremely useless and slow, as if he was just put in the game to troll everyone. Though also no enemy NPC ever thinks about attacking him, so there's that. This is why it's so satisfying to collect all the characters in LEGO Star Wars. There is almost always some element of discovery, finding out what's unique about this minifigure, or alternatively just plain liking the design. I remember when I was 14, I would always choose clone troopers in this game based on looks alone, and the blaster shots being blue. I'm telling you, those kinds of details are important. But I guess not as important as the actual levels you're using these characters in. Level design in LEGO Star Wars for the most part follows a single high-level principle. It's a collection of interchanging linear and somewhat open areas. From time to time, there are other linear sections protruding from them, either mandatory or optional, and some of the optional ones can lead to their own closed-off open areas. So there is not much exploration in the traditional sense of the word, and it's fairly easy to compartmentalize and keep track of everything. Especially important when some of what I called protruding parts are blocked off until free play. Within this overall paradigm though, LEGO Star Wars manages to provide a lot of variety in its levels, and that's thanks to the abilities each minifigure has and potential limitations they impose. This influences not only the design of the level for story mode, but the free play only parts as well, since the game can focus on different combinations of abilities there. As such, if we take a quick look at the Episode 1 campaign for example, the first level is mostly an action romp where you control 2 Jedi and use the Force and jumping abilities to get the collectibles. You quickly discover that minikits are essentially divided into 3 types. Those you can get with the story mode roster of characters, those that you can see in the areas accessible in story mode but need to get in free play, and areas that you can't enter in general, even with the TC-14 protocol droid you meet at some point, who can unlock certain doors, but you also need to find ways to bring them where necessary, since they can't do anything else. Then in level 2 the dynamic changes. Now it's a newly met specialized super jumper who has to help the Jedi go through a swamp, since they're not capable of jumping that high. Level 3 has you start with blaster characters, changing the style of gameplay entirely again, and that of level design too, since with their core ability being the grapple, verticality becomes much more important, as evidenced by the layers upon layers of balconies. Then in the middle of the level, the dynamic is shaken up again by introducing the Jedi into your team. And then level 4 does something else entirely, it's a vehicle level. Now, I recently found out that apparently vehicle levels in this game were pretty hated on, which surprised me, because back in the day and even now, those are some of my most favorite levels. They're much more fast-paced too. If a standard level takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete, a vehicle level is usually around 3 up to 5 if you die several times. And yeah, in the Episode 1 pod race for example, when you don't know what to expect, you might fail a couple times either because you didn't reach the end of the section in time, or due to some very unfortunate rock crashing, but you don't have to restart the whole level, just the recent segment. And really, as long as you just keep pressing gas and use the speed boosts, you're fine. Vehicle levels don't have free play mode, only story, hence being the previously mentioned exceptions where you can get all 10 minikits in one go, but they still can be completed in co-op. I don't know, to me they're fun. The pod race for example has 3 laps, but each lap has distinct challenges in their various segments and the track changes around as you keep going farther and need to either take different paths or avoid more obstacles. Gunship Cavalry from Episode 2 seems to be particularly derided, often being called the worst level in the game, but I just don't see it. It's a nice little shoot 'em up. The only weird thing there is that for some reason, even though you're in a flying vehicle, you fall into holes when above them, but as long as you know about this limitation, it's a very straightforward level. And the Episode 3 battle over Coruscant is quite simply epic. It's also a rail shooter, but from a different perspective, taking you across this huge, giant space battle. You can notice how every vehicle level is very distinct in its style of gameplay, since variety is one of the most important parts of LEGO Star Wars. Anyway, back to episode 1. Level 5 is one of the longer levels out there, taking 20-25 minutes instead of 10-15, but in its story mode your team consists of almost every core type of minifigures in the game, and there is just a lot of freedom in it because different characters have to reach the end of various sections through the usage of special abilities unique to them, and therefore have to help each other out in creating those pathways and possibilities. It's pretty nice, and then episode 1 ends with a boss battle level against Darth Maul with a bunch of stages. In one you throw back some items at him while deflecting blaster shots from droids, then chase him around, then have to defeat some droid squads, culminating in the final confrontation. Even though you can abuse the double jump attack, you still have to avoid the usage of his dark side powers by switching between characters in solo mode, and in co-op by making sure your friend hits Darth Maul while he's trying to use the dark side power. And if you think that starting with episode 2 the game starts to recycle level styles, think again! The first half of the Kamino level is pretty exploratory with no combat at all. But you can find a disco room where you can start a party! The second half goes into chasing and battling Jango territory, and it's actually a perfect example of how LEGO Star Wars tries to make sure that in co-op, both players have something meaningful to do, even if they're controlling wildly different characters. In the Jango boss battle, one player would play as Obi-Wan and another as the astromech droid R4, whose only attack temporarily stuns enemies. However, in this fight, Jango is assisted by Boba in the Slave One, and while Obi-Wan is the only who can deal with the bounty hunter, the player has to keep avoiding shots from the ship. But the astromech droid player can go around and activate anti-air turrets to keep Slave One at bay. It's very nice, and I wish AI would do stuff like this when you're playing solo. Don't get me wrong, AI-controlled characters are programmed to do whatever is necessary to help you out when you need to coordinate actions. But that's only for those that are required to either complete the level or get a collectible. They're not doing the kind of optional but helpful stuff like the one found in a Jango battle. In fact, outside of scripted segments, they're useless. They don't even damage enemies, though this functionality is clearly in the game, since while outside in the hub world, minifigures belonging to different sides will start fighting each other and be quite effective at it. In levels themselves, outside of specific moments, don't expect help from anyone unless you're playing with a friend. Though co-op is also not perfect gameplay-wise, since the camera system can feel very limited, especially in a 4:3 ratio, you'll be fighting it quite a bit. Anyway, I'm not gonna go through every level in the game, but suffice it to say that LEGO Star Wars never ceases to provide something new. From a circular arena level in episode 2, to a very fun battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan at the end of episode 3, full of platforming, segments where the two have to temporarily work together to survive the dangers of Mustafar, and then at the end, both get 10 hearts and have to fight each other. And yes, if you're playing with a friend, then you too are the bosses of one another. It's really creative. And I didn't even get to the optional segments yet. A lot of them are really straightforward, you just need to use the correct character or correct set of characters in free play to reach a certain spot. And speaking of free play characters, you can use them to pass through mandatory obstacles in a way story characters couldn't, saving quite a bit of time. But every now and then you get pretty considerable areas that are essentially full-fledged rooms. Like on Kamino in free play, you can access a whole new segment with 2 mini-kits. One you receive by jumping through the area, while another by accessing the correct vent. In the Droid Factory, there's a nice little puzzle based on knowing color combinations. Again, to me it's not a problem that the challenges can be considered basic, especially by the adult audience, The important part is the variety. You will rarely ever encounter the same type of challenge or situation multiple times. There's only one chase sequence that involves triggering destructible mines. There's only one conveyor belt scene. Only one place where you need to avoid rocks rolling down the slopes. And since various minifigures have very strict limitations in terms of their available actions, which ones are available in a particular level really changes up the design and pacing, since it's physically impossible for missions designed for 2 blaster characters feel exactly the same as missions designed for 2 Jedi, and those are different from levels involving a combination of the two. You will also be particularly thankful for this overall approach of the game, attempting to not repeat itself too often in the situations when something really doesn't work. I don't understand the hate for vehicle levels, for example, because for me they're fun. But there is a level I actually consider bad, and that's Defense of Kashyyyk. It has a number of not the most successful segments, but the worst is the beach one, where you have to contend with an unlimited amount of respawning enemies who keep pestering you when you need to dig up those damn carrots and whatnot. And make sure to not die often in this level, since if you don't get all the stats back, you might not get the super kit. The level is very stingy with its stat requirements. If you happen to die several times, you might reach a point that even searching around everywhere before ending the level, you won't find a single place to get the last of a really big amount of stats already. Not enjoyable at all. And while there are some other levels where the stat requirements are a bit strict, at least they're still good levels. I also want to note how LEGO Star Wars uses actual LEGO pieces only for objects you can interact with in a level, which is very helpful. The rest are traditional models. That being said, while LEGO pieces stand out against them, they don't look out of place due to the overall cartoony style of the visuals. A smart choice, because even though in many cases the locations are very faithful recreations of Star Wars environments, it's still a LEGO game, which means some wackiness has to ensue. A big part of the game's charm is the fact that it's not afraid to have a little bit of fun or be somewhat ridiculous. Gotta love going around with fake mustaches and waving a broom instead of a lightsaber, you know? But what I really appreciate about LEGO Star Wars is that its humor is also very often not that in your face. One of the most memorable locations for me was an optional room in the Jedi Temple where a bunch of clones had a pizza break after genociding the Jedi. There was no cutscene of us interrupting anything, this wasn't an aspect put front and center, and the clones attack you as soon as they see you. But then by going around you notice all the glasses and pizza boxes and whatnot and can't help but smile and maybe even chuckle a bit. I never had anything more than a chuckle here, to be fair, but at the same time I'm not sure LEGO Star Wars ever tries to be actively hilarious. Even in its recreation of the story from episodes 1 to 3. First, unless you have seen the movies, you won't really get the plot at all beyond the overall very broad strokes through the opening crawls before each level and the cutscenes where LEGO figures mumble and emote instead of talking. That being said, what makes the game so charming is that in those cutscenes that don't try to overstay their welcome in terms of length, there's always some cute little details that can bring up a smile. It might be a way the 2 pilots of the Republic cruiser die. Jar Jar sniffing flowers, unaware of the empty tea that's about to crush him. After being cut in half, Darth Maul's legs still standing there in the background, wondering where the top is. These sorts of little moments are what LEGO Star Wars is best at. I have to admit that when the game tries to be more in-your-face funny, like how Obi-Wan's lightsaber doesn't turn on while Qui-Gon handles the droids who captured Queen Amidala, that's just awkward rather than funny. That kind of stuff feels forced. But the unexpected and the small things, like Luke and Leia literally popping out of Padme with a distinct sound, that's when you actually chuckle, especially considering that it's really dark humor given the context of the scene. Speaking of, since LEGO Star Wars was released a bit more than a month before Episode 3 came out in theaters, this is the way how many would experience the story of Revenge of the Sith for the first time, including me. This has led to some other curiosities, like the game not having any evangelistic soundtrack at all, since it wasn't available to developers yet, so for the third movie levels they used music from the original trilogy, which I think overall fits quite well anyway. We're sort of winding down on the arguments and things to talk about, so I guess this is a good moment to rate LEGO Star Wars with my Stasucritic scoring system. Stasucritic is divided into 5 categories of different weights. Every category has 11 scores from 0 to 10, each with their own criteria. The first category is design, with the biggest weight, that of 4, since how a game is built and structured is what defines the experience the most. Now, the score that I'm going to assign might sound surprising to some, since it's a 9. I assume some people would expect a 5 or 6 given the lack of depth in the mechanics and how straightforward the levels are, but I hope I have provided enough arguments regarding just how intricately LEGO Star Wars is built. It's not a complex or deep game by any stretch of imagination, but it doesn't intend to be, yet it has a very solid core loop, great differentiation between characters you're collecting, varied utilization of those characters in the levels, and each mission will provide a pretty unique experience defined by the abilities and limitations of each minifigure. Some things don't quite work out, including some smaller quality of life details I haven't mentioned, like not being able to leave in the middle of a level after finding missing minikit to save it, you always have to get to the end. But LEGO Star Wars achieves pretty much everything it needs to achieve, and as a result, it's just a bundle of great fun. The next category is emotions, which has a weight of 3, and let's not beat around the bush, it's a 9 here as well. Back in the day, I played LEGO Star Wars 1 pretty often, but the last time was around 2007. For sure after LEGO Star Wars 2 came out, but before the complete saga. So there was a pretty big gap between then and now, and while nostalgia might have been a factor, LEGO Star Wars is just an instantly enjoyable game, and going through it feels like a breeze. Not only due to its rather short length, but also because the charm of everything makes it easy to lose track of time and be immersed in this little LEGO experience. Which leads us to Cohesion, a category with a weight of 2 that's about how well the game connects all of its different aspects together into a singular, wholesome experience. I will assign an 8. LEGO Star Wars utilizes tons of very evident abstractions that exist just because it's a game and it has decided that this is how it should work. People who know me and my system are used to me assigning at most a 7 to such games. However, I can't deny that a great deal of effort has clearly gone into making everything feel authentic to Star Wars, even in LEGO form, even with tons of abstractions. This goes beyond the purely aesthetic things like visuals and music. It's all the tiny details encountered, from the sound effects seemingly or literally taken directly from the film, to minifigures having different blaster shot colors, to how the fighting style of Anakin is distinctly more aggressive than that of Obi-Wan. When you play as Yoda, it's not just a random minifigure with a Yoda skin, it's distinctly Yoda, an absolutely different style of controlling a character that you might or might not like. While through a prism of very abstract and in some cases very simple mechanics, you actually do feel like you're in the world of Star Wars, and all these characters act and play how you'd pretty much expect them to feel. With some tiny exceptions there and there, like Jango's jetpack being ineffective on long gaps, but still. Now, let's move on to context, which is all about narrative, world building, character arcs and so on, and here of course the LEGO abstractions are much more in your face. But I think the game still deserves to be assigned a 6, due to a considerable amount of pretty smart humor we have discussed before, even though from the perspective of this technically being an adaptation, you wouldn't get at all beyond very broad strokes what Star Wars is about, unless you've watched Star Wars. And finally, we have aesthetics, and in this category I will sadly have to assign a 9. I don't want to be exceptionally nitpicky in my videos, but as authentic as LEGO Star Wars is, and as atmospheric its utilization of LEGO can be, I did encounter quite a lot of things that feel off. sound effects that appear with a delay, LEGO emotes looking a bit bugged in some cutscenes, some actions seemingly not having any effects attached to them at all. It's just a lot of tiny little things that are very easy to ignore, but considering that the game also doesn't really push anywhere the envelope in terms of quality of aesthetic implementation, even though undoubtedly it looks very nice, the amount of these little blemishes across the board is too high for me to feel comfortable assigning a 10. Also, and this doesn't affect the score in the slightest, but I just have to mention this, my whole life, ever since childhood, I always hated this piece which represented long hair. The amount of cases where it felt fitting has always been exceptionally small. I hate it, I despise it, I have an irrational distaste for this plastic piece, and I'm absolutely glad that nowadays LEGO barely uses it. There, I had to mention it to get this whole thing off my chest. Now we can actually calculate the final rating by taking all the scores and their weights into account, and LEGO Star Wars the video game in the end will get assigned an 85. And it's not that simple to get this rating in my system, so it's definitely a great game that even nowadays with so many other LEGO titles existing can be worthy of your time. I don't think it will be too presumptuous of me to say that nowadays the type of LEGO games that have spawned from this one can be called its own subgenre. There are so many of them by this point that, let's be honest, more likely than not, when you hear the words a LEGO game, you'll probably expect something in the vein of LEGO Star Wars. But there's still something special about LEGO Star Wars in particular. All the tiny little differentiations between minifigures. How every level attempts to be unique in style while also providing challenges for character combinations that wouldn't have been attempted in some other mission. How everything is very focused and there's no fluff, and yet you can replay and enjoy it so many times. LEGO Star Wars knows exactly what it wants, and it's great at achieving that, which is why it really is a true classic, and its focus and simplicity is why I think the game didn't lose its relevance even with the complete saga existing. I hope you've enjoyed this dive into LEGO Star Wars, and please don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Thank you all for watching.
Bye.